Okay, so we are back with the second segment where I'm talking to Rick Allen, who's had an interest in AI and has been following it. And he's had a lot of people asking him questions um, just over the last few years or even longer. And so he thought he'd put together some of what he's learned into this little interview format. And we're going to continue where we left off in the last segment. We were talking about the theoretical stages of AI, sort of where it began, where it's at now, and then presumably we're going to go on and into what is potentially coming down the line. So why don't you go ahead and continue, Rick, and
Sure.
where we left off?
Okay. So we left off in almost current day. So we talk about theoretical versus reality. Remember, all of the ones that we've talked about so far, not too long ago, were all theoretical, um, and they've come to fruition. And where we are now, we're technically at the reasoning age AI with like the Chat GPT and things like that, but um, there so the next phase is, again, from the last segment we talked about, is called artificial general intelligence. The big question, this is a huge question, a lot of people are speculating, when will AGI come around? Okay, so the the numbers vary there. Some people think that we have already achieved AGI. AGI, as a refresher, is when the computer is able to accomplish almost every task better than a human. And when I say that, I mean like intellectual type tasks. Okay, so solving math problems never solved before, for example. Um, there are there are people. When I say people, I mean artificial intelligence programmers who have who are active in the industry, who believe that we might be there already and they're just not releasing it.
Hmm.
So, for example, some people think that a Chat GPT, for example, is about a 1/10 capability of what they actually have.
Okay.
Now, that makes sense. That's not like, it sounds kind of conspiracy theory, but it actually makes sense because if they have any sort of decency when they're programming this stuff, yes, there's a race to get artificial intelligence out there into the world. Unfortunately, there's a race, but at some point you have to understand the dangers, um, and to release something that powerful as soon as you have it without extensive testing and without ramping up the testing from like a 1/10 capability on up, it's not very responsible. It's very irresponsible. Um, and so there's that. You also have somebody like OpenAI, who publicly have stated, we suspect AGI will be here by the year 2027. Okay, so they're giving a date for it. Now, keep in mind, these are one of the people developing it. Does that mean that's when they think it will come to existence, or does that mean when they say they're going to release it? So the speculation is they're ramping up. We're at GPT-4, and then there's 5, 6, 7. When we get to 8, that will be AGI. That's some of the speculation out there. Keep in mind too, that's just one company. Who knows if somebody else is developing this in parallel and are just going to release it or use it without telling anybody. If you're a government, if you're Russia or you're China, are you just going to release that to the world, or are you going to use that for your own capabilities, right? So we don't know exactly. So yeah, we don't. We're the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Throw us in there with China and Russia. So so now we're getting into speculation, not so much what will come, but when it will come. Okay. Um, so that's AGI. Now, what does AGI do in reality? What's capable of doing? So AGI is capable of self-learning. It can determine, hey, I need to know more stuff, so I'm going to go figure it out. Um, it's going to be a lot of the movies that you see I think they're at that AGI level. Terminator, AI, the movie AI by Spielberg slash Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick. Really, they kind of just stopped at AGI, and people are like, "Oh, Terminator, we'll never get to Terminator." The technology for Terminator exists. It's not theoretical. Okay, so a lot of that technology exists. What is Terminator? Or it will exist with AGI. I'll say that. What is Terminator? He's a robot with this advanced chat GPT essentially in his brain, right? And he has a physicality amongst them. So when people say, well, Terminator is just sci-fi, well, it is just sci-fi. It's also like very much underestimating what AI is going to be capable of doing. So when people say that's the danger, I'm like, no, that's not the danger. So that's AGI. Now the next step is super intelligent AI. Okay. Now we're getting into like Star Trek stuff. So if you're a fan of Star Trek, I'm guessing were a fan of Star Trek.
Yeah, bigger Star Wars fan, but yeah, I can
You're a Star
appreciate
Wars
Star
fan?
Trek. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you watch Star Trek, you'll see episodes where like there's or even other movies where it's like somebody. I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but there's one where like a business with a mean CEO. He wants to rule the world, so he comes up with this artificial intelligence. It's this big giant ball that sits in a room in a big room, and you can see it, and it has lights on it, and it just looks smart, right? And it has the ability to do all these things. That's kind of the super intelligent level. It's far beyond human intelligence. It's and so keep in mind there's always stages of this. Like even AGI, there's like 5 distinct stages of AGI. It starts out relatively tame because we have control on it, and then it gets less tame. In fact, let me talk about that a second before I go on more to super intelligence. So what makes it tame? So 2 things make it tame. One, a lack of physicality. So if you have an AGI, but you don't give it a body or way to reach out into the world electronically or physically, you've put a big limiter on it. It just can't do what it wants to do. It has to convince somebody to do that, which AI is very good at doing and will get better at doing. But there's another thing. There's a morality that we build into AI. Okay. So the way I look at it, like, what is morality? So I've been thinking a lot about this last week, just anticipating us having this conversation. And in a sense, morality are limiters that we place on ourselves. We might attain those limiters from different places, maybe from my religion or from the laws of the land or just evolution. For whatever reason, we take all of our capabilities, our human capabilities, and we kind of snip off these certain areas. I will not steal, click, and then now I've limited my ability to steal. I can unclick that, but for the most part, I'm going to keep that limited. My ability to lie, in my morality, I should not lie, so I put a limiter on it. We do the same thing with AI. We say, here's your brain, here's your capability. You're capable of doing all these crazy things, but we're going to put limiters on. We're going to make it so you can't tell somebody how to construct a bomb. We're going to limit you from telling somebody how to commit suicide. We're going to limit you in your ability to speak racist dialogue. Okay. And if you played around with AI, you've probably come across some of this. These are limiters. Now, the interesting thing is, even today, before the AGI, the chat GPT that we have now, keep in mind, what ChatGPT does wasn't really programmed necessarily. Somebody didn't create a routine to do exactly what it does. It basically gave it that brain, that skeleton of the brain and allowed it to grow in a sense. So what happened was it started developing capabilities that they didn't even know it had. So after like a year and a half running, somebody just thought, let me ask if it knows about chemistry. Well, not only did it know about chemistry, it understood chemistry at a college level. No one programmed it for that.
Wow.
And then they ran across it lying. They're like, oh, it can lie? Oh, well, let's put a limiter on that. So it's right now we're kind of safe because it doesn't have the physicality. So when it does something immoral, it's not too late. Our feelings are hurt, and that's it. And then we put a limiter on it, and then we say, okay, go. Now let's see if something else pops up, right? So so that's computer morality as it is today. That's what it is. When you get to the next generation, super intelligence, keep in mind it is, and again, there's stages to this, trillions times more intelligent than a human. Trillions times. It's going to be in the millions, billions, and trillions times more intelligent than a human.
When you say intelligent, are you talking about just the ability to process information quickly and account for all the variables? Or like, what
Yeah.
exactly do you mean more intelligent?
Okay, so I'll tell you how you can kind of visualize it. But there isn't a really super good answer to this because some of it we don't know. We're developing these structures, and some of these structures, like the SGI, that hasn't been released or is theoretical. Who knows what the programming will look like exactly? Okay, we don't know exactly, but we have an idea. So I'm sorry. Ask your question one more time, please.
What do you mean exactly by intelligence? Is it merely a processing speed, the ability to assimilate information and make sense of it, or like what exactly does that mean?
So the way, so intelligence, even just look at humans. Just think about humans. How do I tell if somebody's intelligent or not? Well, first of all, there's a lot of debate about that. Is the SAT fair for underprivileged children? You know, we have debates about this. Is the testing fair? Is the testing the way to determine if somebody's intelligent? Do we go by their success? What is success? Do we, so what we tend to do is create standardized tests and determine somebody's intelligence that way. With AI, to some degree,
we can kind of also sort of intuit, like when we meet somebody and speak to them for a few minutes, there's sort of an intuition that we also have about their level of intelligence or in a particular area, whether it's a physical intelligence or a intellectual intelligence.
Right.
So will it be that sort of
in the short term, it will look very similar. So with AGI, let's say you took AGI and you gave it a physicality. You put it in a humanoid robot body, okay? And you're talking to it. With a good enough robotic body with the physicality looking human, and you don't have this uncanny valley effect or anything like that, I suspect people are going to be creeped out thinking, wow, this thing is intelligent. It knows that I'm here talking to it. It knows it's there. This is what it's going to feel like. Okay. And when you talk about a subject, just like you're talking to a person, you're going to be able to know if it's more or less intelligent than you in this particular in a topic. And you're going to know in a similar fashion. Okay. That's AGI, the one that's possibly exists, but is almost definitely coming, but in the next 3 years. Okay. Now, when you get to SGI, super general intelligence, okay, that's a whole another ballgame. So I look at it like this. So here's the intelligence span of AGI. Here's humans. Okay, so the one preceding the ChatGPT and stuff that we use, the reasoning AI that we use now, it's more like this. So it's here and we're here, okay? height being more intelligent, right? And
Yeah.
there's some overlap, and we can kind of see it. The next generation is going to look like this. Okay. Technically, the AI will be a little more intelligent, but it'll just be like speaking to a really smart person, which, we've all done at some points. So they're still human, they're still relatable, right?
Yeah.
Super general intelligence, super intelligence, I'm sorry. That's a whole nother ballgame. So in the early stages, I would say it will look like this. Imagine a dog and a human, and there's some overlap. A lot of the dog stuff we don't understand because it's almost below us. Like, what are those dogs doing? They're over there barking at each other and smelling each other's butts. Like, okay, they want to know what they ate and if they're healthy. Are they communicating? I don't know. What are they saying to each other? Are they aware that they're barking at each other? I don't know. But there's other things that we do know and overlaps, like, oh, he's hungry. He's letting me know he's hungry. He has to go to the bathroom, or he's wants his belly rubbed. So there's and they sense us in certain ways too. They know, oh, my master's happy, or who's sad, or whatever. So there's some overlap.
Right.
But for the most part, the dog has no clue what's going on up here. If the dog wants to affect us, if let's say we're trading stocks on the stock market, the dog doesn't even know what money is, let alone what a stock market is and trading and all that. So if it wants to affect us, not only does it not have the ability to affect us, it doesn't even have the ability to comprehend what's going on in our world up here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what it's going to be with SGI. We're going to be here, and there's going to be maybe some overlap, right? But there's also going to be an intelligence that is so far beyond us, we don't even know. We couldn't even comprehend it if it explained it to us, because it would just be kind of beyond. Now, there might be some exaggerative language that I'm using right now, but not really. Like, it could actually be that much. Imagine somebody. So IQ, we generally say IQ tops off 200-ish, 240, somewhere in there. That's all theoretical. Technically speaking, IQ is unlimited. There are people predicting that the IQs of these things will be in like the billions. Okay, an IQ of like a billion. Like, it sounds crazy, but that's the technology. That's, by definition, that's the technology, and that's where they're going. Now, keep in mind, OpenAI said, we believe it could happen this decade. So the guys that are programming it, on their webpage, you can find and say, we suspect it might happen this decade. So it's theoretical. It sounds crazy, but it looks like they're making it. And so what does that mean? I don't know. Like, just like a dog doesn't know what it means, interacting with its human. It's going to have so many capabilities that we would just won't understand it. So that's the next reasonable, almost certain step in AI. So AGI is coming next, and maybe exists, and then super intelligence. We almost can't even comprehend it. Now we get into some really crazy stuff. Okay. And so again, now we're getting into theoretical crazy. You can say Rick's crazy, or the people that are saying this are crazy. That you might be right. It might not ever happen. Okay. You asked about being self-aware. So, and emotions. So, I think emotions is harder to answer. Will it experience emotions? Okay. Keep in mind, like, I was taught in middle school by my biology teacher that dogs do not experience emotions. That wasn't that long ago. Now, some scientists still say that. Some people say fish don't experience emotions. There are people that say plants do experience emotions. All those things do, including plants. We're not in agreement on what even emotions mean, especially when it comes to being self-aware. We're not even in agreement in the organic world, let alone the digital world.
Well,
right?
we're not even aware of what consciousness really means from a scientific standpoint.
Correct. Yeah, there is no agreed upon definition for being conscious. Now, that being said, in the self-aware, I just want to tell you a quick story. This just happened this week, and this stuff is changing so quickly. So my whole life, when I thought of robots and AI, and the question always comes up, like, are they going to be self-aware? And when you think about it, when I've always thought about it, I'm like, well, how would we know? Well, we'll ask it questions. Are you self-aware? Okay. It gives the right answer. What does being self-aware mean? It gives a pretty reasonable answer. Demonstrate that you're self-aware, and it might come up with some cool thing to demonstrate, right? Like, how would you prove to somebody that you're self-aware? AI is going to have a similar time trying to do that, right? Well, something happened that I'm not going to say that it proved that it was self-aware. Some people think it was, some people think it wasn't, but it certainly changed my perspective of how we're going to know if AI is self-aware or not. What happened was they fed a computer, an AI, a whole bunch of information. Let's just call it a story. Okay. They fed it a huge story. And then, in fact, that is what they did. And then in that story, they inserted a random fact. And I don't know the random fact, but I know it had to do with, like, I think it had to do with pizza. So let's say the random fact was the average pepperoni pizza has 27 pepperoni slices on it. Inserted in the middle of the story randomly. So they call that needle in the haystack. So they created a needle in the haystack situation for the AI. The more you think about this, the more it'll make jaw drop, probably. They asked it after feeding it the book. They're like, okay, go read this. Okay, now, how many pepperoni slices are on an average pepperoni pizza? They asked it this, okay? Not that question, but whatever the fact was. This is what the AI did. The AI said, he's like, I'm paraphrasing, but this is basically what happened. It said, that's an interesting question. I think you're trying to test me here. You put in this thing, this essentially a needle in the haystack, and then you ask me about it. This is very suspect. Now, I know the answer. The answer is 27. But I find it odd that you would ask me that. Are you testing me? Now, they did not program it to do that. Okay. So what does that say? That says, at least to me, that says it was aware that it existed, because we know that it was aware that somebody else was existing outside of it, testing it. Okay. So it was at least aware that someone else was there to test it, to call them out on it. It also noted, now remember, what do we normally feed computers? Data, zeros and ones. A story is zeros and ones. Why would and this isn't too crazy, but why would the AI take note of that sentence about the pizza and think it was, sure, it can think it's unique, but why would it think it's a test?
Yeah.
And then finally, it considered all that, and it decided to call the programmers out on it. It didn't hold that in for itself. It said, hey, I see what you did there. Why'd you do that? That tells me, like, is there an ego problem here?
Yeah,
like, is it being defensive? Okay. So, that's spooky to me. Now, so I suspect that when we're going to learn that they're self-aware, realize that they're self-aware, we might not exactly know what that will look like, but I think it'll be obvious. And even if it's not, consider this. What difference does it make? Does it change anything? If half of your friends are self-aware and half of them are not, but they all act the same, what difference does it make?
Right.
Not talking spiritually, but from a practical matter. Okay. So, and I suspect when the super intelligent combines with, like, quantum computing, for example, as these technologies merge, I don't even know if emotions are necessary. Like, I don't know. Like, we're creating new life, right? We're creating a new life form. So will it look like us? Does it need to look like us to be considered intelligent? To be considered life? Does it need to follow a pattern? You know, we're what carbon based. Does it need to be carbon based? Can it be silicon based? Can it does it have to have our ethics and morality to be considered a living creature that we've created? What does it need to have? I can tell you this: it'll be smarter than us,
Yeah.
and we're gonna be really dumb in comparison to it. So
It's just interesting that
yeah.
it was interesting. I just read the other day that Voyager's kind of
Oh yeah.
freaked out. And so of course, you know, everybody's now saying like, well, it's going to come back as V'ger here in a few centuries, but
Yeah.
so, yeah, so it might be programming itself out there. I don't know.
So that's a great segue, Ray. So the next form of AI is called transcendent. Transcendent AI is basically one that can create new life forms. So think of like nanobots, for example, and it can essentially create life. It can replicate. So now we're past SGI. So and again, there's overlap, but with super intelligent AI, it can program itself and do all these things. But what about like having a physicality behind it and replicating and going out and basically learning not what we want it to learn, but what it wants to learn. Okay, so that's transcendent, where it just kind of says, I don't even care what I've learned, everything you guys know. There's nobody on earth that's ever lived that knows anything better than I know it.
Well,
So
and then it could almost replicate itself physically like a virus throughout the entire universe and construct its own spaceships. And
so that's the next one, cosmic. Yeah. So the next kind is cosmic. So that's when it goes out into the universe. And not only that, Ray, if you follow science at all, you've heard of multi-dimensions. You've heard like the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, sixth dimension. And you've probably seen the cubes rotating where you can see the shadow of one dimension looks like this versus 3D. We're messing around with that now, trying to understand it. Imagine what a super intelligence would be able to do. That's trillions of times more intelligent than we are. Question is, are they going to be able to access those things and permeate them and interact with those other dimensions? Okay, so we might struggle, but it might be a piece of cake for it, or it might be something capable of doing, especially when it achieves a physicality and it's that smart. So that's the cosmic one. And the final one is godlike AI. And I know this sounds crazy, but like imagine an intelligence that decided to spread itself, and it's so smart that it's created ways to communicate from one galaxy to the next. And it has who knows what kind of probes out there, and it actually starts integrating it itself into the fabric of the universe because it understands it so well that it can actually become sort of like a parasite within a universe and possibly even enter other universes. Because again, or what?
Or a cancer.
Or a cancer. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. And we might not ever, see this happen, but you can see how quickly this stuff is growing and evolving. So
okay, we have about 10 minutes here before we're going to end this segment. There's a we've gotten.
Before we go, I'm sorry, before you go to the next question, you asked me a question last segment and I wanted to transition that real quick.
Gotcha.
Just take a second.
Go ahead.
But you had asked about bringing the technologies together. Okay. This will sound silly, but do you remember Voltron?
Yes.
Okay. So Voltron was the cartoon and it had the lions, robots, and then I think there was 5 of them and they had different colors. And then when they wanted to get powerful, they transformed into this Voltron character, which is a big robot, and some were the legs and some were the arms, some was the torso and head. And it did that. When it did that, the individual parts were very much imperfect. They had specific tasks they could do. But when they all came together and there's this energy force and it made them into Voltron, then their powers magnify. its overall physical and intellectual powers magnified, and all the faults kind of went away, and it just became one big incredible being. In fact, it was so powerful at that point that it could create this sword. What was the sword called? I don't remember. The flaming sword or whatever it was called,
Yeah,
right?
I don't remember the name, but
The
yes.
blazing sword or something like that, right? So this giant sword, and that was the ultimate weapon. And whenever you saw that, you're like, why didn't you just start with that? When the
Right.
bad guys were coming, like you should have started with that. But that's kind of what's happening with AI, at least how
Mm.
I see it. There's these different technologies, these different skill sets, and this is what people I don't think really think about. They're like, well, I fool around with AI and it seems fine. This AI, it's pretty harmless, right? These robots they're creating, come on, they can barely do parkour, or whatever.
Right.
They just learn how to do parkour. How dangerous can they be? Well, all of these technologies, first of all, are in the baby stages. Like how much were you hearing about AI a year ago? Not a whole lot,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's all in the baby stages. So I looked it up between our break here. The phone, the first phone where it was where it went through the line, like everybody had their phone numbers basically,
Hmm.
and then you could call direct. That was 88 years ago, Ray. 88 years ago.
Yeah.
So think about not just the phones that we have now, but the technology, the communication technology that we have now after 88 years. So people are like, oh, that'll never happen in my lifetime. Go back 88 years and tell them what's happening now. And in
Hmm.
fact, go back to 1994 and tell people what's going to happen now. People
Right.
will laugh at you.
Yeah.
So I would be slow to say like, um, you know, this isn't going anywhere. Like this will be okay. And let's talk more about that another time. But as far as like, is this going to be dangerous? Is it going to be helpful? Should we be afraid? That's a conversation that we need to have here. But I will say this: the capabilities of the worst science fiction nightmares, it's capable of happening if we allow it. Okay, so I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm saying it's a potential thing that could happen. And I hope if you've been listening to me this whole time, you can kind of see why that is and where it's going. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we might end this segment there. Just some things that we want to touch on in the next segment. So I'd like to sort of dial it back into where we are right now, in some respect.
sure.
Um, I'd like for us to discuss a little bit about the idea of AI, of there being a bias or an ideological slant in AI.
Sure.
You had some interesting things that you showed me recently, and we won't get into that now, but that shows that a lot of the information that AI is taking on sort of tends to potentially slant it in one ideological direction or the other. And so we should not be assuming that when we're asking AI questions that we're getting this objective, non uh, non-slanted answer.
Sure.
Anyway, I think we covered a lot, and we'll end here, and then we'll pick up with some of those questions and maybe a few others in the next segment. So,
Appreciate you, Ray. Thank you
all
very
right,
much.
we'll talk to you
All right,
soon.
sir. All right.